My name is Richard Burns, a United States veteran with a dishonourable discharge, but maybe we'll get to that later. For now I awake, barely remembering the days previous. I'd met a military pilot on the road, but before he died in my arms he gave me two things, a military radio and a map with an extraction point. If I got there, a helicopter would be able to pick me up and take me to safety. The only problem, it was in Louisville, or as some might call it, the City of the Dead. And I'm over 10,000 metres away in the not so peaceful town of Rosewood. And to make things worse, I only had 7 days to complete the journey. If I were to complete this treacherous journey, I was going to need supplies. Mainly of vehicles. I certainly couldn't walk my way to Louisville. I was also going to need weapons, medical supplies, food, and plenty of fuel. So I set my sights on Rosewood Fire Station for my first stop. I'd almost certainly be able to get some much needed tools to help me survive, as well as some basic medical supplies from their infirmary. And en route, I took out a dozen or so members of the undead, with nothing more than a metal pipe I had looted from a shed. I was still strong and fit even though I was very underweight, sadly a symptom of my depressive state from the earlier mentioned dishonourable discharge. With the door locked, I make my way through the window and pick up a hammer and screwdriver from the shelves. Now I'll be able to dismantle doors that would otherwise block me on my journey. In the storage cupboard, I replace my metal pipe with an axe. Then next door I pick up bandages, painkillers and antidepressants to keep me sane on the long road ahead. But sensing there's nothing else of use here, I move on to test out my new axe on the undead outside the fire station. Okay, and my new military boots I took from one of the lockers inside. Sadly, both the hatchback and motorcycle out front didn't have any petrol or keys, so I make my way to my next destination, the Rosewood police station across the road. And thankfully the axe can make short work of anything that stands in our way. Inside the police station I find exactly what I'm looking for, a zombie with a bag that I can use to store all of my loot. Although it does take bloody ages to batter him to death. With that I can make my way through the offices collecting cigarettes and lighters, as well as a quick drink from the water fountain. How you doing, miss? Need a hand escaping? Next up is the real reason I'm here, the Armory. Although it seems someone has already beaten me to it. That's okay, I can just repay the favour. I collect a pistol, rifle, multiple magazines and boxes of 308, 9mm and plenty of shotgun shells. Sadly though, no shotgun. So next up I turn my attention to the changing room, as I'm looking for protection from the undead threat. No, nothing rubber, we're not looking for that kind of protection. I get myself a balaclava, long trousers and an armoured police jacket. I should hopefully provide some defence against the inevitable scratches we'll be getting along the journey. Next up I need a ride to get us moving. So I head into the car park where I discover a Bronco and a motherfucking army truck. Jesus Christ. And it looks like this thing has seen its fair share of action. I'm assuming that's not strawberry jam on its bonnet. Amazingly I find a key in the ignition of the Bronco, but sadly no petrol. Whereas I find a key for the truck on the floor and just enough petrol to take the thing for a spin. Although I decide given its size and poor condition, this shouldn't be the vehicle we set out in. I make our way to the fuel station on the edge of town, although that loud diesel engine has attracted a big old pile of walking corpses. And just like that, our first injury. Pretty sure that won't be our last though. And as I've already hurt myself, I decide against risking my life any further, and instead use the gigantic battering ram to do all the hard work for me. Although this proves to be more difficult than I first thought, as it kinda has a habit of stalling at the worst possible moments. Just another reason why I won't be using this thing long term. Nonetheless, I do exactly what I gotta do. They do say the end of the world don't mean shit when you've got a tank, and while this certainly lacks the firepower, it definitely provides the bulk. Anyway, with everything nearby properly squished into mulch, I run out of diesel just shy of the pump. Fucking typical. I then check out the quad bike parked up nearby and get ourselves a firebomb, before breaking into the nearby shop and stuffing our face with all the high calorie goodies I can find. Bulking season has very much begun. Then seeing as it's getting late, I decide now would be a good time to take a rest, so head to the apartment above and call it a night, until I'm awoken at 1:20 by shattered glass. Although that turns out to be a minor inconvenience at best, until I notice the horde of knobheads outside of course. And with me still over encumbered from the day previous, this is going to be an interesting fight. Or not, I guess. Even though it's early, we got plenty of ground to cover, so I decide to get an early start on the day, and using an empty fuel can from the back of the army truck, I fill up and head back into town to try and find a more suitable vehicle, and while there are plenty of options, none of which have any keys, and seeing as I wasn't a teenage delinquent, I have no knowledge on how to hotwire vehicles. So in the end, I'm forced back to the Bronco back at the police station. To be honest, I'm just glad for a more permanent place to store my heaviest items. Then as I puff away the anxiety with a cigarette, I realise there's one more area I need to loot before I leave leave Rosewood. The bar known as the Bright Flag Inn. Unfortunately, some of the previous patrons are still hanging around in the car park. Fuck's sake, lads, it's not even 7 o'clock yet. What do you think this is, a Wetherspoons? And seeing as I'm still carrying an injury from the day before, and it being day 2 and I haven't set anything on fire yet, and with a name like Burns, it's time to test out that firebomb. And almost went completely wrong straight from the off. Oh my god, that's a lot of fire. How the hell do I craft them? With a terrible fate avoided, at least the hordes are now alight. Now all I need is a bit of patience. Although I decide now would be a good time to test out my new rifle, although I must be faulty as I couldn't even hit a Z point blank. They say a bad workman blames his tools. Well, I say shut the fuck up, the trigger was really hard to squeeze. Rather unsurprisingly, that gunshot has attracted more and more of the undead to our location, so it takes even longer to burn through them. The bail bonds place also engulfs, but after several hours of maintaining my cool and walking in circles, the horde burns down to a more manageable range. I can then gain access through the bar's windows, stuff my face with all the food I can find, then collect 13 bourbon from behind the bar to be used to craft into Molotov cocktails. Fire was almost certainly going to be my most valuable tool for dealing with the undead, especially as we get closer to Louisville. I expect the hordes to get even larger. But now I've become extra fatigued. Was it the cheeky beer I had in the bar, or perhaps because I've been up since 1:30 in the morning? I'll let you decide that one in the comment section. I fully fuel up the Bronco as well as a spare gas can to sit in the boot. Then I decide it's probably best to have a cheeky 2-hour nap in the apartment above the petrol station before leaving Rosewood behind in the late afternoon. It was 4:10 and we still had a long way to go before my intended rest spot tonight. I knew of a little farmhouse just north of Riverside that should be quiet enough for me to hold up for the night. However, the highways were long and full of potential hazards ranging from hordes to broken down vehicles. But after over an hour of highway driving, I get to the Riverside junction. Ah, fuck. Luckily nothing too serious, but that's certainly gonna cause me issues at some point if I'm not careful. I continue my journey north and it quickly becomes clear how much of a challenge I'm gonna have on my hands. Riverside is much more heavily populated than Rosewood, and them being spaced out as much as they are means it's inevitable that I'm gonna hit a few. But eventually I make it to my junction, and after a brief off-road trek through the trees, I make it safely to the farmhouse. Firstly, I check out the shed to the side, and even though it has plenty of useful tools, there's nothing I'm gonna need on this journey, so I turn my attention to searching the house. Shit. An alarm is literally the last thing I was thinking. All the undead in the area are now going to flood to my location. I could become surrounded. I had to get out of here. But where exactly would I go? I'd already seen that town was heavily populated. I couldn't grab a place to stay without a serious fight. And with fatigue slowly taking course, that's not going to end well. No, enough running. I'd been running my entire life. Even before the fall of society, it was time to stand my ground and fight with everything I had. I will be staying at this farmhouse tonight. The alarm had already finished by the time I got back, so I await the onslaught of the undead, but it never really comes. Just 3 lonely zombies lost in the woods. I was safe. My guess is the trees provided insulation from the nearby town. After washing away 2 days of blood, sweat and fecal matter, I stuff my face with all I can from the fridge. And as a bout of depression rushes over me, I take some oxy I found in the bathroom and sleep in the master bedroom. I wake at 6 AM the next morning and start the day off with a cigarette and a selection of cooked meats for breakfast. But my terrible dental hygiene had come back to bite me in the arse as I needed painkillers to remove the toothache. Getting an early start, I leave the farmhouse behind and I realise I'm going to need a significant upgrade on my firepower if I want to enter Louisville. I was going to need to raid a gun store. However, in order to do that, I was going to need a sledgehammer, and luckily we had driven past a warehouse on the way here last night, and if I was going to get a sledgehammer, surely it was going to be there. I pull up outside to assess the job at hand, and it's quite clear I'm not going to be able to clear all these with just my axe and a rifle that couldn't shoot straight. Definitely a dodgy rifle. I'm a veteran. After herding all the undead with the Bronco, I park up properly because this is the remains of society, and once I'm convinced everybody's properly chasing me, it's only a matter of dropping a molly behind me. Then it's just a waiting game. I walk in circles around the car park for 2 hours while the flames do their job. There's also a van parked outside in nearly perfect condition, even nearly having a full tank of fuel. Sadly though, there's no keys, so I'm gonna have to leave that one behind. The door was locked, so I break through the window and take out the 2 Zeds that were alerted and make my way inside. I then help myself to the food in the break room fridge because I'm that kind of employee. Then I'm forced to bludgeon a chef to death with my axe. That's not how you cook a pear, you bellend. And with that, I can get to searching the many boxes within the warehouse, picking up a crowbar along the way, and eventually the Holy Grail. the sledgehammer. Now I'll be able to gain access to any gun store, and I had the perfect one in mind. There was one on the east side of West Point just off the highway. It even had a bar next door. So once you purchase your firearm, you can go and get drunk and shoot someone in a bar fight. I planned on using the bar as a safe place to spend the night before looting the gun store in the morning. Although on my way while travelling on the highway, I noticed another military vehicle. Nah mate, that's gotta be bait surely. Sadly there was no key to be found, but I do find more oxy in the glove box. And it's not as if the journey was wasted, as I also get a military backpack off a nearby Zed. So I move on before a couple miles later. No way, another one. Alright, that's sick. But not only was it in terrible condition, there was no keys and not even any recreational drugs in the glove box. But luckily a few miles later we come across a used car dealership, and surely I'll be able to find an upgrade for my Bronco. I spot a van, Land Rover and a pickup around the back, but first I was gonna have to clear the undead before I can safely check them out. And you can probably guess by now I know exactly how to deal with them. Molotov, baby! Time to burn them all to the ground. Well, with a name like Dick Burns, I've got to live up to the reputation. After another hour and a half of looping around the car park, the horde falls. And after checking out the conditions of the 3 vehicles I had my eyes on, it was clear the pickup was the only way to go. But with no keys on the ground ignition or the dash, I was gonna have to check out the office. But even after searching every container, the only key I found was for the building itself. What a terrible way to sell cars. You just expect the customers to hotwire them? I take the opportunity to refresh myself from the vending machine before taking off in the car I arrived in. Disappointed to say the least. I continue north for a few miles until the highway starts to snake around, and suddenly I'm heading east. That's short-lived, as once I cross the train tracks a few more miles down the road and I've arrived in West Point. Being clever enough to stay on the outskirts of town, I'm hoping to avoid any serious fights. I cut through the supermarket car park and arrive at our destination, Twiggy's Bar. But it was clear after circling the area that the undead had gathered in serious numbers, and I wasn't going to be able to use my axe to get out of this situation. So out on foot, I start screaming at the top of my lungs to get everybody's attention and draw them all towards me. I want them all bundled together so the flames from the molly I'm about to throw will spread quickly and efficiently. It was already 7:30 and I knew I was looking at another 2-hour walk to burn them all down. Then once I'm happy that pursuing crowds are large enough, I drop the molly and start manoeuvring the hordes back through the flames to get as much spread as possible. But I had to be careful, as the last thing I needed was the bar I intended on sleeping in also becoming engulfed. So I lead them towards a supermarket car park, as that way I'll also be able to scope out the vehicles in the area: van, quad, shitty thing and a prison bus. Perhaps I can get something working in the morning once I've looted the gun store. This time the burn went on longer than previous. Maybe it was the sheer amount of the undead, or perhaps the trip to scout out the vehicles that spread them out, causing the flames to spread slower. Either way, the last of the Zeds die out about 20 past 10. Then I noticed another mini horde that had been waiting between the bar and the gun store. Maybe they suffer from pyrophobia. Either way, nothing's gonna save you from this axe. With my victory secured, I puff on a cigarette and indulge in a can of tomatoes from the back of the car, then head into the bar, blocking off the stairs with some cardboard boxes before having a drunken sleep on one of the chairs upstairs. The previous night's escapades meant I woke up much later than I wanted, but seeing as I was ahead of schedule, it wasn't really a problem. I'd grabbed a can of gas from the Bronco and headed into West Point to try and find a new vehicle. Although it seems not everything in the immediate area had burnt up with last night's fire, so I had to get the axe out and get to work. Unfortunately, it doesn't take too long before the hordes start to become overwhelming, and the fight draws more and more of the undead to our presence. I could use a Molotov, but seeing as that would take hours, I don't want to waste the time. I just want a new vehicle, loot the gun store, and get the hell out of here. The horde was finally dead, but unfortunately I find no keys for either of the vehicles in the first car park. I was going to have to go deeper into West Point. Although heading around the front meant another large fight, and being exhausted from the first, I decided to head around the back instead. Sadly, that was a mistake. The undead start to flood from the woods, and my only option is to push forward. But by pushing forward, more and more of the undead have become alerted to my presence. Things are starting to escalate. After coming across another car park, I decide to try and fight to check out what's good, but again get quickly overrun. And with exhaustion slowly kicking in, I've got to whip out the pistol and start blasting. Although it seems being a veteran hasn't really made my shooting any better. Maybe it wasn't the rifle after all. There was now only one way out of this disaster, and that's fire. I then make sure to do a couple of loops around the car park to herd everyone together and begin the arduous task of walking in circles while waiting for the undead to catch a light. However, I'm still exhausted and I fear the feeling will not be going away anytime soon. An hour and a half later and the hordes have kept growing in size, and fearing I'll get too tired to run away, I decide to try and lose the hordes, but just end up attracting the 2 hordes I was trying to avoid earlier. So with shit very much escalating beyond my control, I head further into West Point, hoping to use the denser collection of buildings to lose the chasing Zeds. I head down an alleyway and back down the main street, but the burning Zeds are still very much present. Using the little stamina I had left, I jogged to the nearby Jeep to check out its condition. I had to have something to show for today. The vehicle was in good condition, I just had to pray there was a key in the ignition or glove box. But with the door locked and a burning horde approaching, I had to once again get moving. But the alley I had escaped through earlier has now become fully engulfed in flames, so I decided to head north. And by some miracle I find another car park with a van in. I needed all the space I could as my current car was already approaching capacity and I hadn't even looted the gun shop yet. It too was locked, so I smash a window, but that sets off an alarm that will just bring even more of them down onto me. I had to run. Foolishly, I chose to run through some small trees and almost end up as an afternoon snack for the undead. I make my way down another street, but the alarm has alerted every single zombie to my presence. We're very much in deep shit here. The coffee shop I passed earlier was now a complete wreck, but at least I could head back up the alleyway as most of the flames had died out. And after another quick sprint, I break into the Jeep, but once again, we get no key. And what's even worse, the hordes catch up to me quicker than I was expecting, and I take a hit to the neck. Luckily, it wasn't a bite, but a laceration still has a 25% chance of infecting me with a zombie virus. But that was a problem for later. Right now, I needed to get out of here. Even more heartbreaking is the fact I've lost my beret. I tried to make our way back towards the van just to have a sneaky look at the situation, but the situation is very much out of hand. To the east, a large group of burning Zeds, and to the north, a thinner horde, not ablaze but closing in on me, and looking to shut off my escape. But I had made it through. But everywhere I went, more of the undead were waiting for me. This had been an unmitigated disaster. West Point was ablaze, I was bleeding from the neck, and burning Zeds were inches from turning me into a walking barbecue buffet. I head south where more zombies I've ever seen ablaze and chasing me down. I had to stay nimble and patient to remain breathing. I actually managed to briefly lose the horse with a sprint and using the buildings to block the view, and managed to return my beret to the top of my head. And when I get back to the van, there's just a single solitary zombie waiting for me, but once again no key was found inside the vehicle. Defeated, tired, and in a lot of pain, I accept my failure and make my way back towards the bar. But as I was also hungry, I decide to take a risk and try to grab a quick bite from the Gigamart. But the burning undead had breached the perimeter. I first head to the deli counter, but everything was uncooked and I've got no way of cooking. Unless you want to ask these guys to stay still, of course. At the fridges, I grab some Kung Pao chicken as the hordes reach me. Then I grab some fruit from the front of the store before making my escape. Unfortunately, the fruit was stale, so I had to settle for the Kung Pao chicken. Then I get back to the bar and eliminate the few zombies chasing me before grabbing the sledgehammer from the Bronco. Today had been a disaster. It was time to loot the gun store before an early night and getting back on the road in the morning. I break my way inside and start looting, focusing on 9mm and shotgun ammo as well as M9 magazines for the pistol I already had. I also finally got my hands on a shotgun, but with me tired and over encumbered, it was time to call it a night. But going to bed past midnight means I have another late wake up, and to make things worse, a fucking helicopter was circling overhead. After waiting a few hours for it to go away, I immediately hop into the Bronco and leave West Point for good before another horde causes me any more issues. But I don't get very far as a bridge I need to cross is blocked in both directions. An investigating on foot shows exactly the scale of the problem. I was simply not going to make it through with my car. Surprisingly, I do manage to find a car on the other side with a key in the ignition, but I've seen walking corpses in better condition than this thing. But with no other options, I spend the next hour or so ferrying my most valuable loot across the bridge and set off. Although in doing so, I realised I was completely out of food, so in order for me to eat tonight, I was going to need to make another stop. Oh shit, fuck. Well, that's not the kind of stop I was talking about. Either way, I sought out the undead that was alerted to my crash. But the car doesn't make it 2 meters before stalling. So it looks like I'm going to be making a significant portion of this journey on foot. After a couple of miles, I notice a dirt track and decide to investigate. Perhaps it would lead to a car or maybe a safe space to spend the night. It actually led me to a drag racing strip. Surely I'd be able to find a car at a racing track. But first I was going to have to burn up all the undead that had followed me to this destination. You could probably figure out where this is going right now. I just remain patient and ahead of the horde until it burns up. By the time the undead burn up, it's closing in on 10 o'clock and I'm getting hungry. So I investigate the first building, and even though it had a mini fridge, there was sadly nothing to eat. There was another building nearby, but it was just a garage with no food, and to make things worse, I hadn't found any signs of any vehicles during the 2-hour burning of the undead. Fuck. So after another day's failure, I barricade myself into the little office and sleep on a chair. My stomach pains awake me at 5 in the morning, and there's no point hanging around here any longer, so I have to come up with a plan. I head back to my car from the day previous to collect gas and other supplies I'd need, mainly the shotgun shells and mollies if I'm being honest. Although with 4 Molotovs, 12 boxes of shotgun ammo, a full can of gas, as well as being really hungry, I was obviously over encumbered. And the thick fog certainly wasn't helping the situation, but with less than 50 hours remaining, I couldn't afford to wait it out. So I continue north for a couple of hours until I spot the first signs of civilization, a building on the other side of the train tracks. It had to have some kind of food in it. After hopping the fence to investigate, sure enough, there looked to be a kitchen in there. But unfortunately, being the conspicuous lad I was, meant zombies had flocked to my area, and being over encumbered means there was only one way I was winning this fight. Molotov time, baby. This time I had to be very careful to control the fire. The last thing I wanted right now was the fire to spread into these buildings and me not be able to feed myself. The horde was all burnt up by the late morning, which means I could head inside and refuel myself for the journey ahead. Sadly, the fog remained, so I couldn't investigate the area more. So I headed back to the highway as I figured that might be the best hope of finding a vehicle. After another couple of hours of walking along the highway, the fog starts to disperse, and I find a rest stop which has a couple of cars in. So I drop the gas can and get to work. Molotov time, baby. I once again circle the car park while the undead burn behind me, while I'm fighting the tiredness from the last few nights of rough sleeping with a bottle of vitamins. The last of the Zeds fall at 4 in the afternoon, but typically none of the 3 cars in the car park have keys in. Looks like I'm in trouble. There's a housing estate on the other side of the highway, but with my vitamins low, the best way to relieve my tiredness is locking myself in the bathroom and sleeping on a dining chair. I awake at midnight, but with only 32 hours remaining, I didn't have the time to wait for daylight. I had to find transport now. I spot a pickup I missed the day before on the highway, but that also had no key. I was starting to regret my past decisions. Why couldn't I have been a criminal? The ability to hotwire would have saved my life multiple times by now. But here I am, making my way through a housing estate in the middle of the night with no torch, and I'm getting bloody soaked. My depression was starting to take hold. What was the point of going forward? Surely everywhere I went, the undead would be waiting, just itching for a chance to disembowel me at a moment's notice. No, don't be stupid. Pull yourself together, Dick. You've been through worse than this. You can still make it to Louisville, make it to the chopper, and live a normal life outside of Kentucky. It took forever, but eventually I find a vehicle, but the crowds that were now following me were gonna prevent me from searching it for a key. So with no time to waste, I get out my penultimate molly and get to work. But all I could do was be patient and await the bodies to burn up. The rain had stopped and the last zombie had burnt up, so I turned my attention to the vehicle. Overall, the condition was pretty good, but it didn't have any petrol, which is fine because... shit! I left the can back at the rest area. What a dickhead. With no key in the car, I investigate the house and actually find it under the kitchen sink. Before I head back for the can of gas, I store my heavier items in the trunk, then make a move. The rain had started again, but with no fog and the sun having now risen, it was much easier to traverse the highways. I collect the petrol, then take out a few Zeds to prevent them from following me back. By 8:30 we were refueled and ready to get back on the road, although I still had a long way to go before my destination. 24 hours until my extraction. Pulling back onto the highway, I continue north for a few miles, weaving through a destroyed traffic jam until I get to a military checkpoint. But being unsure if the car can drive through the barricade, I decide not to risk it and head out on foot to investigate. One thing was for sure, there was still plenty of the undead I was gonna have to deal with in order to make it through into Louisville. I head through a gate that's gratefully unlocked and make sure to close it behind me to at least slow the flow of the undead. I continue north, depressed and tired, but at least I can snack to remove my hunger. The hordes threaten to block me in, so I push on and drop my final Molotov. Let's hope I don't need more when I get into Louisville. And as the flames start to take hold, I decide to help him out a bit. No point looting all this shotgun ammo if I'm not going to use it. The gunshot will draw more and more of the undead, but for the first time on my journey I was feeling confident. Tired and depressed, but also confident. The shotgun was doing its bit while the flames spread and devoured everyone that joined the horde. The rain might be back, but nothing could dampen my spirits now. I continue firing the shotgun into the afternoon, and for now it seems no more zombies have joined the horde. I just had to clear what remained. I take out the last head with my axe, then I can get to searching for some tasty loot. But all of the containers were empty. What the fuck was going on? Had someone beaten me to it? I was expecting at least some high-grade military shit at a military checkpoint. Disappointed, I head back towards my car, and once I've removed the barricade, I can get the car through. And seeing as the hard work has already been done, I can get through to the other side. Just 17 hours left, and with no more major obstacles in the way, I needed to find somewhere to sleep. I didn't know what the extraction event had in store for me, but I definitely wanted to be fully prepared. So I aimed for the rich properties on the west side of town. I should have some decent protection as well as a comfortable bed to sleep in for my last night in Kentucky. My plan was to stick to the highways on the outskirts and hopefully avoid any major traffic. I get to the gated community, and once I choose a house without many of the undead outside its perimeter, I sense my opportunity, it's time to take it. I rush down the side of the wall through the trees before hopping over and making my way inside. An alarm here would have almost certainly been a death, but thankfully I was inside, and for the first time in what seemed like forever, I was pretty safe. Once the downstairs curtains are closed, I attempt to quench my hunger in the kitchen, but the dead were at my back door. With gritted teeth, I ready my axe and open the door. They flood in and I beat them to death one at a time. I've fought way too hard for this to be the way I lose. With all of my needs met, other than tiredness of course, I make my way upstairs where I can hear banging. There was at least one zombie up here, but if several came storming out, it could all be over. I find one, but it takes forever for me to stamp him out. The tiredness is really taking its toll. The last banging door. Could this spell the end? Nope, just one more solitary Zed. I sweep the rest of the house but find nothing of any use, so I set my alarm for 4 in the morning and get some rest. I wake at 1 in the morning, anxious for the day's events. In little under 8 hours I would be saved, I just had to keep my cool. I stuff my face with all I can from the fridge, then decide to get an early start, seeing as I didn't know exactly where I need to go, or how long it was going to take to get there. It seemed a horde had breached the gate of the night, and not wanting to take any chances, I throw myself over the wall and sprint back to where I left the car the evening before. But not being able to see anything, I already realised I had made a mistake. But it was too late to go back now, so I used my headlights to illuminate the way. We had less than 1,000 meters to go, and I couldn't help but think back to all we had gone through. Escaping Rosewood, sleeping on a farm, burning down the majority of West Point. It'd been a proper adventure, but one I was glad was coming to an end. I get within 50 meters of the extraction point. I just had to climb 6 levels to what I'm assuming is a helipad. Unfortunately, I could see precisely fuck all. Then as I start to mow down the undead with my back end, the car stalls, so I gotta run for my life, just narrowly escaping the jaws of defeat. I throw myself over a fence, at least this area was more illuminated, but the undead have started to work out their way around the fences. And knowing I needed to be up several levels, I climb the first staircase I find, but it just leads to a bridge back over the road, and the undead have figured that out as well. Fuck! I was trapped, hordes approaching from each side and not able to throw myself over the side. It was time to fight, but shit, that's a lot of them. They're getting closer, more and more coming up the stairs below. I panic, I run through. No, don't be stupid, we gotta fight. No, there's too many of them. Ah, fuck, it's just too dark, I can't see anything. I throw myself over the edge and just end up in a pile of them. Ah, shit, what the fuck is that? No, get off me, you piece of shit. Fuck, come on, just keep going, I can make it, no, ow, ah, Jesus, no, not like this, come on, you can do it, Richard Burns survived for 6 days, 18 hours, killing nearly 1,200 zombies on his journey. His tale is now yours to take forth with you. A cautionary tale about risking life and limb in the middle of the night. The last things going through that poor man's head as he bled out on that wet floor is dishonourable discharge for simply giving his commanding officer chlamydia.